The saddest thing about this case is the fact that kulikuwa na so many signs that something bad was going to happen, so many signs that something really bad was boiling among the boys specifically. There had been a lot of rape cases reported to the school administration and nothing was really done about it. Even worse, there had been threats against the school principal that the boys were going to kill him and actually throw a celebration party after his death. So it's very sad that the school administration did nothing against all these threats, against all these cases. And I think and I feel that this is what led to the massacre actually happening and the massacre actually being actualized. Hello. My name is Koi Wangoi and I started this channel when I noticed that there are not that many YouTube channels covering African stories and Kenyan stories. Let's just say African stories in general. So yeah, so I started this channel to just bridge that gap as someone who consumes a lot of true crime, a lot of cult stories, a lot of dark histories, and I felt like that's a gap that has not been filled for Africans who are also interested in such stories. If you watch a lot of true crime, cults, dark histories, if that's something you enjoy watching, then this is the channel for you, especially for Kenyan stories and African stories in general. So that is going to be my focus. But if you guys are interested in stories beyond the African borders, you can just let me know and we'll work on them. And with that said, let's jump into today's case. So today's case happened in a school then named St. Kizito Mixed Secondary School. But the school did not start as a mixed school actually. The school was established in 1968 as St. Kizito Boys High School. It was an all-boys school until 1975, when the school started admitting girls. By 1991, the year which the case happened, the school had about 577 students with about 306 boys and 277 girls. Schools in that era had very low funding, and this would often bring a lot of disagreements between the teachers or the administration and the students. And St. Kizito was no exception, especially their principal, their then principal, Mr. James Laiboni. The students did not like that man. In fact, at some point they threatened to kill him. While he was walking across the school compound, he came across a placard with the words written threatening to kill him, and they actually promised to throw a celebration party once his death, if and when they managed to execute him. He took this very seriously and actually went to the police, but there was nothing the police would do really, because there was no DNA in that era. There's nothing really they could go on for or go on with, and so they sent the principal back to the school and told him to come back once he had more incriminating evidence. The principal went back, and I don't think he found anything because he never went back to the police about the same. But about 2 months before this massacre happened, an anonymous letter was sent to the school administration telling the principal that the students were now ready to execute him. And he really took this seriously, because immediately a school meeting was called and the administration and the students came to an agreement on how they were going to resolve their issues. We do not know if the issues were resolved, but we do know that they took some action by calling an emergency meeting between their school administration and the students. In mid-1991, around the time this massacre happened, there had been a lot of strikes happening across schools in Kenya. The main problems were actually lack of funding, as I had mentioned earlier. Main issues raised were lack of running water in schools and lack of enough food. Around the same time, there are inter-schools athletic competitions happening in Meru district, and St. Kizito students were informed that they were not going to participate because of the lack of funds, of course, in the school. And this angered the boys specifically, and they decided they were going to also strike just like other schools. But the girls were not having it. The girls did not want to take part in the strike, and this led to the boys redirecting their anger to the girls instead of the school administration. And this is how the plan for this massacre started. At around 8:30 p.m. on July 13th, 1991, the boys cut the power supply to the school, And usually when there was a power outage in the school, the students would go to their dorms and start the next day afresh. So this is what they did. But the girls didn't know that that night was going to be one of their worst nightmares. At around 10 p.m., the boys came towards the girls' dorms and started throwing stones at them. Out of fear, all the girls went to the one dorm that they believed was the safest. It had metal grills on the windows. It also had metallic doors. So they believed that once they barricaded the doors, they would all be safe in there. The problem was that that dorm usually hosted about 70 students, usually. And now it was forced to host about more than 270 girls. And this meant that they were very congested in there. Luckily, one teacher had the commotion and actually came to the girls to the girls' dorms and ordered the boys to go to their dormitories, and they did. But what was not known at the time was that the boys were really determined to do whatever they'd planned. So at around midnight, they came back and started throwing the stones again. But this time, that's not all they did. They actually went into the dorms and started pulling out some of the girls, dragging them to the grass fields nearby, and raping them. The girls tried calling for help, but it wasn't that easy, as rape was very common in the schools and it wasn't taken seriously, especially by the night guards. But when they noticed that it was not as usual, they eventually went to look for help. But the problem was the power outage meant that the school's phone line was also disconnected. So at around 2 a.m., one of the watchmen went to a mission nearby and to seek help from Reverend Alexander. And together they went to a hospital that was nearby, Tigania Hospital, which is very close by to the school, where they managed to call the police. Unfortunately, the police were not very quick to come and to offer the help they were needed to. They actually claimed that they did not have fuel to come to the school, and so it took them, I think, about an hour to get to the school. They came at around 3 a.m. and by this time about 71 girls had already been raped and 19 already dead. The 19 girls were later determined through autopsy to have been killed by suffocation, some of them through trampling, or some of them were killed by beds falling on them, the beds they were using to barricade the doors. So none of the dead girls were actually killed by the boys, and autopsy actually showed none of the dead girls were actually raped. So this meant that when they were being convicted, the boys were not convicted or charged. The boys were not charged of murder, but more of manslaughter, because it was not, the girls did not die by directly being killed by the boys, but as a result of the actions of the boy. By the time the police were coming to the school at around 3 a.m., the boys had already fled from the school. The girls were also still scared, still hiding in the dorm, not knowing what happened to the 71 girls that were dragged out, not knowing that among them, 19 of them had already lost their lives. So one of the teachers came to actually pick them out of the dorm, and when he called out, the girls didn't want to come out. They were still scared. They still thought they were being lied to, and the boys were tricking them to get out of the dorm so they could continue doing whatever they were doing. And it took some convincing, and they did not leave the dorms actually until they saw the police in the compound, and that's when the girls actually came out so that the investigation could start. The then president, the late Daniel Moi, was among the first people to actually get to the school the next day. There's actually a local publication that notes he wept at the sight of the aftermath of the massacre. He ordered an immediate close down of the school and thorough investigation to be conducted, which immediately commenced, and an autopsy was done on the deceased girls, and it was noted that none of them were raped, and most of them died out of suffocation and being trampled on. Also, 3 watchmen from the school were actually arrested for failing to stop the boys from whatever they were doing, but they were actually later released, and they didn't face any consequences. The reason they were arrested initially was because they'd asked the girls to be quiet when they screamed for help, which is really crazy in my opinion. As the investigation continued, the investigators narrowed down to about 39 boys, and they asked them to turn themselves in, which they didn't. And the police continued looking for them, and until and they didn't turn themselves in until the government threatened to arrest their parents. So clearly, I think the parents were helping them escape and helping them hide, which is also very crazy, because knowing your kid just raped someone or your kid caused the death of someone and you keep hiding them is really crazy in my opinion. But that was them. So when the government threatened to arrest the parents, the 39 boys turned themselves in and they were now charged with rape and manslaughter. I said they were not charged with murder because there was no direct, they didn't directly kill the girls, but their actions caused the death of the 19 girls. So they were charged with rape and manslaughter. Out of the 39, actually only 10 of them were convicted. The 29 were later released for different reasons, mostly due to lack of evidence connecting them to the crimes. During the investigation, that's when it was realized just how bad the situation in the school had been. Even prior to the massacre, there had been a lot of rape cases, but nothing was being done about them. The teachers and the administration in general usually took it as just a normal thing. It's just something that happened. Actually, the school principal, and I'll quote what he said, gave a statement, and this is what he said. In the past, the boys would scare the girls out of their dormitories, and in the process, they would get hold of them and drag them to the bushes where they would do their thing, and the matter would end there. By do their thing, he means the boys would rape the girls, and the matter would end there. He means that nothing was ever done to the boys. The deputy principal, her name was Joyce Kivira, also made a very damning statement. She said, "The boys never meant any harm against the girls. They just wanted to rape." So according to her, rape was never any form of harm, which is really crazy because she was never terminated. I don't feel like they both ever faced any form of punishment. The deputy principal was terminated for a while, but she was later reinstated, which is crazy. I don't think the two of them should have ever held any other position in a school to make it worse. The 10 boys who were convicted served their time, which was very few years for most of them. It was about 3-4 years for most of them, and they were released after serving their time, and they were free to live among civilians. They are now about between 47 and 51-year-old men living normal lives, I would say, seemingly normal lives. Actually, the suspected ringleader of the group owns a timber yard in the same town that he committed the crime, so that's very crazy. But on the other hand, locals said that most of the suspects of those crimes, most of those boys are now either dead, they're drunkards, or they've gone completely mad. Like literally, they're mad, and which sounds like some sort of justice, because I feel like the system really failed the girls. So getting some sort of justice in any way is very, I don't want to say fulfilling, but I feel like it's such a good thing. It's such a positive, it's not even a positive thing, but I feel like I don't know, it's something. The action that the government took after this event was converting a lot of mixed schools into one-sex schools. So a lot of the schools became an all-girls school or an all-boys schools, and that was actually the time when most schools were converted into either an all-boys school or an all-girls school, which I don't know. I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I feel like that was a good time for the education system, to introduce sex education in school. I don't know. I feel like something more impactful should have been done than just separating the girls and the boys. I feel like education should have been improved in some sort of way. I don't know. I don't know what you guys feel, but I feel like that the separating the girls and boys wasn't enough. Unfortunately, a lot of girls had to drop out after this event. A lot of those who didn't drop out immediately went to other schools, faced a lot of stigma, and eventually were forced to drop out. Some didn't drop out but ended up getting very low grades. I don't think they got any form of support mentally and psychologically. Mental health wasn't very big in the 90s, and so I feel like so many dreams were shattered that night. Lives were lost, of course. Lives were destroyed in one way or another. And I feel like there should have been more punishment for everyone involved, including the teachers, including the watchmen, the whole administration, the whole. I feel like something more should have been done, more than what was done should have been done. The school was actually years later, reopened as an all-boys school. It's now called St. Cyprian Boys High School. It's an all-boys school, and it's now in operation. It took years for it to be reopened, but it is now in operation. So I almost forgot, and I really want to mention this. Parents to the 19 dead victims actually got some form of compensation, which I really don't think is any form of compensation. All parents were given by the government 500 shillings each, which is roughly about 15,000 shillings in today's money. So I don't know what they were supposed to do with that money. 15,000 is not even going to cover burial costs. So it's this case is really messed up in all angles, from how it came to be, from how it was handled, from the aftercare. It's just a very messed up case, and it really paints the place of the girl child in the 90s Kenyan society, and to some extent even today's Kenyan society. It also shows us how messed up our police have been since then till date. Our justice system, our education system, there's so much that we need to do as a country. There's so much we need to do as citizens. There's so much the government needs to do. I don't know what you guys think. You can let me know what you guys think. But yeah, those are my thoughts. This is a very messed up case, to be honest, and in my opinion.